What you are listening to is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual litigants with a case pending in the squared circle. Both parties have agreed to dismiss their cases and have their disputes settled here in our forum, the Turnbuckle Debate.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Turnbuckle Debate. My name is Sneed.
I'm Chad.
I'm Tom, the OG Fig Kid, the staple of the Turnbuckle Debate.
And our guest this week, joining us from the Wrestling DeLorean Podcast, Mr. Mike DINERO. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor, for sure.
We're pumped to have you on, man. I saw recently how you kind of joined forces with Circle of Debate. Yeah. We love Ivan and those guys. How did that come about? Tell us about Wrestling DeLorean Podcast. Let our listeners know what is up.
Yeah, I've been doing the Wrestling DeLorean Podcast for about 2 years now. We're on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Basically, what we do is we talk about all the modern stuff, but we have one segment every episode where we go back in time. On Mondays, I'm covering the Monday Night War in its entirety. On Wednesdays, we talk about my favorite promotion of all time, ECW. And then on Fridays, we talk about some old school TNA stuff, but that's on top of all the modern stuff. With Circle of Debate, I was just asked to come on this show once, and then one time became come on again next week. And then it became, all right, we really like having you come on again next week. And then eventually they said, do you want to be a full-time host? And I was like, hell yeah. So that's awesome. That's how I got with Circle of Debate. Yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And real quick shout out. If you guys watch the debate on Mondays on YouTube, we have new overlays, sexy overlays, brought to you by Mr. Young Anthony, Indie Epicenter, formerly Titantron. Killing it. Thank you, Anthony.
Shout out Young Anthony.
His talents are limitless.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so what we do, we have 3 topics. We'll go 12, 15 minutes on each one. Let everybody, voice their opinion, debate it out. Try to keep Tom from not talking, or try to keep him from talking. So, yeah. But if you guys are ready, we should probably just get right into the first topic if you guys want to.
Let's do it.
Let's go. All right. First topic of the evening. In relation to Sasha, Naomi, Jonathan Gresham, all those situations that's come to light recently, for or against wrestlers walking out on a promotion after perceived bad booking.
Yeah, I love how you added the perceived word in there, because to them it's bad booking because it's involving themselves. And if you have a contract, even if you don't like it, like Chad, if you're doing your job and you don't feel like delivering a portion of your out today, we can't do that. I can't skip a table at work from dealing poker because I don't feel like doing it. It's our job. It's our duty. So I don't really think they have a right to walk out. They could vocalize their opinion to their bosses, but to walk out, I just don't feel that's the right way to handle things.
See, I'm kind of torn on this situation because I think the Gresham situation and the Sasha Naomi situation are entirely different things. With Sasha and Naomi, I almost kind of side with them because, look, you sign a contract. It is your job to fulfill that deal. You put your name on the paper. You know what I mean? So there is a level of that. It's like, hey, shouldn't have signed that contract if you didn't want to do what they asked you to do. I get that. But at the same time with Sasha and Naomi, I feel like they weren't even being used, man. That tag division, here they are wanting to do something with it, and they're just kind of being put on the back burner. And there does come a point where it's like you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything type of thing, where it's like you have to put your foot down if you want to see change. Sometimes you do have to sit out. With Gresham, I felt like, and this is all coming from a 30,000 foot view of the situation. None of us know exactly what went on behind closed doors. So we're getting all of this from dirt sheets, online reporting, all of that shit. So yeah, that's what I'm basing my opinion off of. But with Gresham, it seemed like he got a little boo-boo face when he found out he was going to have to drop the title to Claudio. And when he walked out for that match, you could see it on his face. He didn't even come out with the octopus gimmick. He came out in pretty much a t-shirt and his tights. He had boo-boo face written all over him. Didn't look like he was happy to be there. In that situation, I kind of like side with the company because it's like, man, you signed up for this. Winning and losing in wrestling is nothing. Like, so what? You lose the title, you know? So I think it's a very different situation between these two.
I mean, I do agree. Like, we have not heard from any of these parties on their side, and I would love to hear their view of it because they know stuff we don't know. Like, we only know what WWE told us about Sasha and Naomi.
Yeah,
we don't know anything, so we're still outsiders, realistically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for it. If you voice, if I guess there's a caveat to it. If you have voiced your opinion and you have brought to the table your concerns and nothing's changed and you're not even being used, I fully support you walking out. If you're just fed, which I mean, that's with any job. If you're fed up with something and nothing's changed and you've done your due diligence to make it happen, walk out, leave. But if it's the situation where you just don't like what's going on, so you don't talk it out, you don't bring any ideas to the table, that's a different story. I don't support walking out in that situation.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it's a case by case scenario for me. To be honest, this is where things get really messy with the whole independent contractor and then signing contracts. Because in my opinion, if you're an independent contractor, you have the right to walk out of any situation that you don't want to be in. 100%. So I firmly believe, also like not to get so like, in depth, like with law of attraction and stuff like that. I always feel like if you're not valued or if you don't feel appreciated or if you don't feel comfortable in any position, life is too short to stay in a position where you're not happy. So I strongly believe, it's their right to walk out if they don't feel valued. They're an independent contractor. They have that right. For the case of Sasha and Naomi, I firmly believe that they were in the right for walking out. But yeah, for Jonathan Gresham, it was a little interesting because, it came out of nowhere. Like, we didn't hear anything about any, hurt feelings beforehand. It didn't seem like he was upset with the booking of, him on AEW Rampage, defending the title against Lee Moriarty or joining Tully Blanchard Enterprises or whatever it was called. And then all of a sudden now he's like, we hear he's cursing now Tony Khan. So it's really weird because, like you said, we don't know the whole story. I would like to hear a little bit more. Maybe he was trying to communicate this for a couple of weeks and there was no communication on Tony Khan's side. So I don't know. I think it's a case-by-case scenario. But either way, I do think that as an independent contractor, you held the right to walk out of any situation you don't want to be in.
Yeah, I'm with you in that because, like, with the Sasha thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, Mike, you guys might know better than me, but like, she had been at odds with WWE for a long time. She had threatened to leave that company like a couple years prior to this whole situation.
Yeah. She lost. I think it was when they lost the tag team titles at WrestleMania like 2 years ago. Yeah. Or maybe even 3 years ago. And then she wasn't seen for like 4 months after that because she didn't feel valued and she didn't want to be there. And then it's going to be the first time.
Right. So I think they made it right. She started making those tweets to Vince McMahon about how much he paid her. And so it's like, you could see that they didn't just show up to Raw or SmackDown that night and get mad and leave.
Yeah.
It felt like with Gresham, it did feel like it came out of nowhere because one, the AEW ROH partnership is very fresh. That just happened in April. Also, it's like, dude, you were getting pushed.
Yeah.
They just brought you onto their weekly show, gave you a heel turn, which was the most interesting thing that had happened to you in a while, as far as like American national audiences. You're about to get pushed. And it worries me when I hear someone like Eddie Kingston, who is like, he stays in character with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, shitting on them, but behind closed doors, Eddie is like the cheerleader for independent wrestlers. And for him to come out publicly, it came out earlier this week where he said something along the lines of,
It's like there's something about him I don't like. I don't trust him or something.
I don't trust this dude.
Yeah.
There's something about Gresham I don't like. And it was a shoot interview. Like, he was supposedly being legit. That makes me think like, okay, maybe this guy was rubbing people wrong in the back.
Yeah.
And Gresham's wife or longtime girlfriend, Jordan Grace, I know she gets a lot of heat from people too for being kind of strong-minded, strong-willed. It is what it is, but it's tricky, man. It's very tricky.
I was super pumped when he had the heel turn.
I loved it.
I thought it was going to be a lot of fun. And then it came out, which it was so out of the blue with the heel turn. It almost made me think that it was a work. Like it almost made me think that, but then seems like it's absolutely not.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll say this about Sasha and Naomi. Like, yes, the booking was crap. We all knew that. We saw it. The women's tag team championships meant nothing. But you knew, of course, this is going back a month now. When you signed with WWE, you were signing with Vince's WWE. Everything you did went through Vince. It didn't matter. Like, he didn't take input. And you knew that. Like, if you could suggest something to him, but if he didn't like it, it was going to be done his way. And when you signed a contract with them, you knew that's how he ran it. So if you didn't like it, you probably shouldn't have signed a contract. There
is that. There is that, like, what at that time before the Triple H regime, you knew what the deal was. But at the same time,
they had a track record.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Yeah. If you guys watched the Sasha Banks Broken Skull sessions with Steve Austin, Sasha, unless she was putting it on, Sasha said a few things on there where she was like, I'm bigger than the WWE. I'm bigger than the company. In that regard, I'm like, you need to pump your brakes because this train keeps rolling long after you're gone. Yeah. But I have to mention what Mike said because it's so true with that independent contractor thing. UFC is like this. WWE is like this. AEW is like this. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to call you an independent contractor to get around certain things, health insurance, things like that. But then they want to lock you down and treat you like an employee when it comes to you can't work here, you can't come and go as you please. I think that's an issue. You had the politician Andrew
Wang or something.
Andrew Yang, yeah. He was targeting WWE for that sort of stuff.
It's just like, hey, that's crossing the border of, are you truly an independent contractor if they're not allowing you to go out and take other jobs when you could be?
That's why I said it gets really messy at that point, because it's like, all right, then what do you consider yourself? Like, are you an independent contractor or are you an employee? And if you're going to be treated like an employee, then screw it. Give me healthcare then. Give me stuff that's going to, because if I'm not an employee, then don't treat me like an employee.
Right. Do you guys think, now there's recent reports about Naomi and Sasha coming back under Triple H. Now, the source that reported that is like wrestlingnews.co. I'm like, it's nobody reputable, but do you see them coming back or do you think they're going to hit the open market?
It was me. I'm the one that I report. I just wrote it.
I feel like it's just one of those things that every WWE fan said, oh, Triple H is in charge now. There's a good chance they'll come back, which I think is probably true. They know, like we saw what Triple H did for them in NXT. So they would be more willing to come back than coming back to Vince and going right back to the same thing it was used to. So the doors are probably open again for them. And I'm not going to be shocked if they return in the near future.
I could see them coming back as well, for sure. Especially with Sasha Banks, what she did in NXT, working with Triple H before. And then on top of that, like we've heard rumors like a couple years ago that she'd be willing to go back to NXT to work with Triple H. And then we also know how Stephanie is a big supporter of the women's evolution. So I could see them feeling more valued in this new regime of WWE.
Yeah, I could see them coming back, or I could see Tony Khan throwing stupid money at Sasha.
I can see Naomi coming back. Her husband's there. Yeah. I can see that happening. I don't see Sasha coming back.
I think right now, I love that those early reports have got out there because, behind closed doors, anyone who was trying to get Sasha is now throwing the bank at her. No pun intended.
For sure.
Good point.
Now, when it comes
It's a
to
bank
Gresham,
statement.
yeah, it's a bank statement. When it comes to Gresham, do you guys think, he was reportedly cussed Tony Khan out in the back, asked to be released, or said he wanted to quit? I forget what the exact wording was. Do you think he ends up getting that request and leaving, or do you think things are going to get worked out with ROH and Gresham?
I think he's done. My guess is he's done.
I think he's done too.
Yeah, I think Tony Khan should put his foot down so he doesn't have more people doing this shit. Show him right away, hey, you're going to do this, you're done with my company.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And also, you don't want the morale in the company being that even people who don't want to be there, you're forcing them to be there, because WWE got a bad rap for that too. So if you're trying to be the alternative, if somebody really truly doesn't want to be there, then we don't want you here.
I'm with you. I think it's a smart business move. If he's unhappy and he's a burly guy in the locker room, why would you want him there? He's going to throw a wrench into your supposed family-like environment in the back. So yeah.
They don't need him either,
Right.
Like, it would be nice if you're there, but we don't need you there.
Right.
Claudio took the title off of you for a reason.
Yeah.
But I could say, to play devil's advocate though, when there was uncertainty for Ring of Honor and we didn't know what was the fate of Ring of Honor, he did hold that Ring of Honor flag down, and he performed in other companies and defended that title and kept the name alive. So when Ring of Honor does come back and the first show you lose the title, like, I can see why he would be pissed off. But also, this is professional wrestling, like you guys said. Like, wins and losses happen. People don't win titles and hold them forever. You know what I mean? So, like, it's a part of the business. But I could see how you could feel hurt. Like, I was the guy waving the Ring of Honor flag when there was no Ring of Honor, and then my appreciation is, oh, well, you're dropping it to Claudio.
Yeah, when I came on the Honor Society with you, Sneed, and we were talking about it, I think most of us outside of Freems picked Gresham to retain the title, because it seemed like how they just turned him heel with Tully, that there was going to be this major push behind him. And what a way to build a guy who doesn't maybe grab the casual than to have him beat Claudio. But with Claudio winning, I totally get that too, because he is that big name. And if you want to get ROH more popular, put a guy that everyone knows. Everyone knows him as Cesaro. It made sense to me.
And it's not just like a guy that came from the WWE. Claudio's history in Ring of Honor goes way back. So it's not like it was just a random guy. This wasn't, making Miro the champion or something where he had no prior history with ROH. I remember Claudio versus Takashi Morishima, like, that was a banger. I remember his title match against Nigel McGuinness and the Kings of Wrestling. So he has history with Ring of Honor. So it made sense to me too.
Yeah. He's one of those, the Nigels, the Danielsons, the Punks, the Samoa Joes. Claudio was right in the mix of that early ROH days. So it did make sense. So, and that's why initially in the debate, I was like, Gresham came out with boo-boo face, because I'm like, dude, you're losing to an ROH legend. It's not like now, if they had him come out and lose to a complete scrub, then I'm like, oh, they're burying this dude. You're losing to Claudio. This could have came into like a trilogy match, or there could have been a big rematch in this. I thought it was from the knowledge we knew. I thought the Gresham thing I had an issue with. The Sasha thing I did not have an issue with.
Yeah, in my opinion, like, it would be like, I could understand if he was a little pissed off, say if he lost the title on Rampage to Lee Moriarty and not to Claudio on ROH. That would be like, all right, that's a little weird. This is a guy who's been representing ROH. He doesn't even lose the title on an ROH show, and it's to a guy who is not a Ring of Honor wrestler. So I could understand that, but not to Claudio.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we move on to our next topic?
Nope. No, I'm good.
All right. So our next topic of the evening: who was more influential in the 90s, WCW or ECW? Now, Mike, this is the question that you brought to the table, so I'll defer to you to go first.
Yeah, when you think of like the 90s, for the early part of the 90s, the WWE was, way behind in the times. You had ECW, who was pulling out more edgy stuff on TV, and then eventually you had WCW with the NWO. I think, though, in the end, it came down to ECW, because if you think about what made WWE take that next step forward, it was the Attitude Era. And a lot of the stuff in the Attitude Era was a direct descendant of what was going down in Philadelphia. So I think for sure the WWE won the war because of the style that ECW had. They took that and went national with it. So for sure, I think ECW was way more influential. Also, we saw a lot more hardcore wrestling on both WCW and WWE because of ECW. We've seen a lot of ECW wrestlers who were huge names in the WWE start out in ECW on both sides. So you had Stone Cold, Mick Foley, the Dudley Boys. They go to WWE. On the other side, you had guys like Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio all go to WCW. And if you don't have ECW, you don't really have those wrestlers. So I think that ECW for sure was more influential.
I'm with you. I thought ECW too, but kind of for what you touched on, it brought hardcore wrestling more to mainstream in America, that more wrestling fans got to know it. I know it was big in Japan and stuff, but like before ECW, I really don't remember hearing much about it here. And now we got deathmatch wrestling. 20 years later, we're still seeing hardcore stuff. So I typically thought of it strictly on the hardcore stuff and how that's become so much more known amongst wrestling fans now.
Yeah, I am a huge WCW mark. WCW is my shit. But if we're going with who's the most influential in the 90s, I got to go with ECW. And it's, you know, it's for kind of one of the reasons that you brought up, Mike, was the Attitude Era. And it's a lot of that stuff was pulled from things that happened in ECW. You know, you had Sandman was getting crucified, then the Ministry's doing it. And then you had the Gangstas doing their, you know, the race stuff. And then you had Nation of Domination.
Yep.
You know, a lot of that was pulled from ECW, and ECW changed what a wrestler looked like. You know, it kind of went away from the cartoony WCW, WWF stuff that was going on. And it was more of an outsider's crew. I mean, and I don't think we had wrestlers like the Dudleys if ECW didn't happen. So sure. I go with ECW for sure.
So ECW totally, the point that Mike made about you wouldn't have had the WCW cruiserweight division without the Jerichos, Malenkos, all of those guys. And then you've got Steve Austin, Mick Foley, even Brian Pillman. They show up in ECW, kind of revitalize their characters, then go into WWE. That's a great argument. And I do think like the whole hardcore movement that ECW started, probably, if we're talking about what wrestling today looks like, a big portion of that is ECW. A big portion of GCW comes from ECW. You know what I mean? Like it was the grandfather, the dad of that, gave birth to that. But I keep going back to Bash at the Beach, 1996. This shit gets brought up all the time. To me, if that NWO, Hulk Hogan, Third Man, Scott Hall showing up on Nitro, if that doesn't happen, ECW's not making this major change in the industry to me that it is now. Like the changes that it made, to me, everything with the Attitude Era started at that New World Order. The way they told stories shifted. It wasn't just, oh, there's this new gimmick match in hardcore, because, okay, you gave wrestling the modern day hardcore match. Was that as impactful and influential on wrestling in general as Hulk Hogan turning heel? Hulk Hogan turning heel is arguably a top 2 or 3 thing in wrestling history. Like, I think it's said so much now that people lose the weight of what that actually was. Because it's been every time there's a top 10 bad guys, top 10 factions, top 10 heel turns, it's always New World Order, Hulk Hogan. So it almost washes over us now. And we forget how fucking important that was. So, like, I agree that probably, like, the Jerichos, the Eddie Guerreros, the Stone Colds, all of that stuff. Paul Heyman, brilliant mind, one of my favorite minds ever in the business. Love ECW. There wouldn't be all the phenomenal Attitude Era hardcore stuff that was going on, the GCWs of today. I get that, but just on not the total body of NWO's work, because NWO turned into a shit show. Let's be honest.
For sure, yeah.
But dude, those first 6 months of that faction was like pouring gasoline on a fire to wrestling fandom. People were tuning in like, what the fuck is going on? This is back when people still were kind of unsure of like, is this real? What's going on here? Hogan turned into a bad guy. And this was when most of those kids were getting into their teen years and we're like, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. And then this guy comes out, they're throwing trash in the ring. He leg drops Macho Man. People's minds blown. And then that forced Vince to be like, oh shit, Duke the Dumpster Drozy and Doink the Clown ain't working anymore. We got to do something, you know? So to me, that makes WCW more influential on the wrestling business than ECW. Just that alone.
It's hard to argue that point. That's a very good point.
That's what Chad does around here.
I mean, I could argue ECW though too, man. Like, it's a hard topic because I think they've both given so much, like much to the business.
So the turn happened in what, 96? Was that MASH 96? Mm-hmm. What was ECW doing in 96?
That's what they were in the middle of the big Raven versus Tommy Dreamer feud.
Incredible.
The Raven versus Sandman feud was early 96. And then I believe like middle 96 with like the whole child abduction and brainwashing him to like hate his father and follow Raven, and then the crucifixion stuff. On top of that, you know, Taz was on a killing spree. He was, you know, calling out Sabu.
Yeah,
he was calling out Sabu, and Sabu and him didn't touch for almost a year. So like they were building up to this monster grudge match between them. So there was a lot of good stuff going down in 96. Like I feel like that 96, 97 era for ECW was the best era for ECW.
And 96 was when they were getting fucking raided on talent.
Yeah.
Because I want to say 96 was when WCW went in and scooped all their guys. Because 97 in WCW was when you had the Malenkos. Yeah. Like late 96.
It's been said that the first victim of the Monday Night Wars was ECW.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't on the playing field, but they were the first victims of them because of the raid, because of the talent sweeps that happened.
Like Chad said, like if you think about early 96, that's when Malenko, Guerrero, Benoit, they all went to WCW. So Paul Heyman's answer to that was to bring Extreme Lucha Libre to the ECW arena, and that's when he brought in guys like Mysterio and La Parka and Psychosis. Yeah, and then by the end of 96, all of them went to WCW too. So their answer to the raid got raided as well. So 96 was a tough year, and then also that was the year where Mick Foley went to the WWE. That was the year, like early 96. Or was that 95? It might have been like late 95, early 96.
It was
Yeah. So Mick Foley was a big name there. Cactus Jack was huge in ECW. He got taken. That was also around the same area where I believe Shane Douglas and Chris Candido also left and went to WWE.
Yep.
They came back later on, but so a lot of their top stars were taken away from them in that year. And they still have, if you think about all those stars that were taken away, they still have a hell of a year just based off of the stuff that Sabu and Taz were doing, based off of Raven and Dreamer, based off of Terry Funk making his chase for the title. So it's a testament to them for sure.
So do you think that ECW having that sense of realism in their company at that time influenced what happened with the NWO turn or with Hulk Hogan's turn?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, because if you think about like the first time we started to see real reality in wrestling, it was ECW, and it came years before the Hulk Hogan turn. So I'm not going to say that Eric Bischoff was watching ECW and got influenced by it,
Yeah.
but that was the first time that I remember seeing it. So
they would never admit to that.
oh, hell no.
All the Bischoffs and Bruce Pritchards of the world like to call the Outlaw Mud Show bullshit, Bingo Hall bullshit. But that's a great point, Sneed. I think NWO, regardless of what they say, NWO is it came from two things, in my opinion. Seeing the reality of ECW and that edge and that like fan fervor, that underground vibe of it.
Yeah.
But that they started looking there because Hulkamania was getting fucking booed in WCW.
Yep.
And they didn't know what to do. And they started looking like, we got to do something. Because watch Hogan in early 96, man. He was not getting good reactions anymore. People were tired of that shit.
Yeah. I covered it all last year for the DeLorean. And to be honest, even going back and watching it, I was bored. I was like, all right, come on, Hogan. Like, can we just skip to Bash at the Beach?
and
yeah.
I know I said WCW, but I'm going to flip onto y'all's side real quick, just to make a point, an argument that you guys haven't said yet. You kind of alluded to the fact that ECW was getting raided by WCW, by WWE, the fact that their roster was getting just cherry picked, and they continued to fight against that. A small company going against Ted Turner money and Vince McMahon money.
Yeah.
This company that had no money still continued to produce stars. That's an argument that they had the bigger impact because they had their backs against the wall. They didn't have unlimited money to work with. But to counter my own point, Vince was sliding them checks under the table. So you can't make him the underdog all the way.
Because Lawler was going over there and doing a lot of real stuff.
Yeah. So you had the 97 invasion of ECW. You saw them on Raw. So there was definitely a partnership. And as much as Paul Heyman wants to deny it, we all know like there was a partnership. I think even to the point where their last pay-per-view was funded by WWE.
Yep.
The Guilty as Charged 2001, like they couldn't afford to do that. Like not when the promotion was so in the red that they couldn't even like pay the performers. But even after they cherry picked all the talent, even that last pay-per-view, which was like 2 months before they went under, if you look at the talent roster on that pay-per-view, you still had Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn and Super Crazy and Tommy Dreamer. They had a hell of a roster to the very end. So that was the best thing about it too, because every time somebody left or somebody was rated, it was always next man up. And they always had somebody to be that next man up, which is, I feel like they also influence like the spirit of like Ring of Honor and some of the independents of today, because like, I feel like that was the way with like Ring of Honor too. Like if you think about Ring of Honor's roster, they were always getting like rated by WWE, TNA, and it was always the next man up. When they took CM Punk, Samoa Joe was still there. When they took Joe, Bryan Danielson stood up. When they took Danielson and Nigel, you had Roderick Strong, Davey Richards, Eddie Edwards. So for sure, like that was the same spirit that they had. So I think that even to today, I think that ECW is more influential because they basically created what we know now as like the indie scene. Like not just GCW, but the Ring of Honor spirit was early days of MLW was very ECW based. So I definitely feel like they influenced more of what we see today.
Just shows you what happens how companies develop stars on their own.
Yeah.
What Vince's version of WWE had been doing for the last 10 to 15 years.
Well, I'll say this, like, even though I think WCW with the NWO Hogan heel turn makes WCW for me the most influential, if this was just a slightly different debate and we're saying who is the most influential figure to come out of WCW or ECW in the 90s, it's Paul fucking Heyman all day.
Yeah.
Like there's credit to WCW because some of the big things they had happen under their watch, but like as far as just affecting the business, one individual, there's nobody that came out of those two companies like Paul Heyman. I mean, there's a little argument to be had. I think Eric Bischoff kind of gets the short end of the stick on a lot of things. He's an easy guy to paint as a villain, but he did have a really fun run in TNA. He was responsible for the Aces and Eights story, which I think is a very underrated storyline in wrestling. But even with that, it doesn't touch Paul Heyman.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we move on to our final topic?
Yeah, I was a little biased. I don't know if you see the shirt here, but
Yeah,
He's wearing an ECW shirt.
yeah.
I love ECW, but long live WCW.
Yeah, even though I picked ECW, I mean, I'm gonna be WCW for life. That's just
WCW was awesome too.
Yep. All right, guys, our final topic of the evening. Should AEW fear the Triple H era of WWE and up their story game, or just continue business as usual? There's a lot that's changed in the past 2 weeks.
Yep.
I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. I don't think they have to change. They still have the superior product as of now. Just continue.
Who, AEW?
AEW. Their matches are better. Their stories, I mean, are their stories perfect? No, there are things that I think can be improved. I don't like what they're doing with almost any of their championships. None of them feel important right now. They have to fix that. But overall, the product is better. Their pay-per-views are better. Their pay-per-views are banger. They have 10 matches. Every pay-per-view, bell to bell, every match is always a banger.
So you think continue business as usual?
It's continue it. Like they're killing it. Just fine tune it. But they don't. I mean, I saw they made a bunch of changes today with some executives and creative and putting different people in charge of different things and giving out some promotions. But I don't think they need to panic. I wouldn't panic yet.
I'm going to say that they should probably, I mean, I love what they do, but I'm going to say they should probably up the game. And the reason I say that is because, well, there's two reasons. One, Triple H has his finger on the pulse of what their audience, what their key demographic is. Triple H knows about that demographic and he knows what to do. Also, to stay on Triple H, he's been known as to be quoted. Well, people said that his nickname, Petty Betty.
Petty Betty.
People
I've never heard that, but I love it.
People called him Petty Betty. I think Freddie Prinze Jr. called him that.
Yes, it came from his podcast. That's right.
Called him Petty Betty. and I think that's a scary thing if he's going to be Petty Betty and come in there and have his finger. And I think he knows what needs to change. And I think they need to, and I don't hate what they're doing, but I think that they need to definitely take a look at it and tighten it up a little bit.
This is what comes to mind when I think of this question, and we're naked right now. I forgot to put it back on. I'll get the trick. I'll get the handle of it soon. When I think of this topic, I think of that quote that Triple H released when Dynamite had their debut episode, and Triple H congratulated them and said it's a marathon, not a sprint. Now, when NXT folded up shop, moved, decided not to go head to head with them anymore.
Go head to head with the Pissant Company.
Right. Everyone thought, oh, what happened to the marathon? Well, the marathon's back on. The marathon didn't just end with that. Now Triple H is in charge.
It never stopped.
Yeah. He was thinking long term. I love AEW, but I was raised on WCW and WWE. So I obviously love that company too. I think it's been pretty lackluster and pretty terrible in Vince's old age. A lot of the booking choices I just think is terrible. But Tony Khan should be fucking panicking. Hardcore. Yeah, they put on phenomenal pay-per-views. They put on great matches. But I've said it from the jump. They've yet to do that big landmark storyline that draws the casuals in. They don't have that NWO storyline. They don't have that Mega Powers Explode storyline. They don't have Stone Cold versus Mr. McMahon. They have yet to have that story. They are so, even though they do a lot of slow burn stories, there's a lot of 2-month build to the pay-per-view. There's no real week after week after week drawing us into really deep storytelling.
Yeah.
They've yet to tap into that. They need that really, really bad. And the reason Tony should be panicking and firing guns, every gun he has, as far as putting these guys in good storylines and starting to move his talent around more than he is now, he's got a lot of people sitting in catering every week. A lot.
Yeah.
And he needs to get those people involved in interesting, fulfilling storylines, because those contracts are going to come up. And now this isn't Vince McMahon we're dealing with. Now you've got Triple H behind a company. So the fear of working for an outdated Vince McMahon is gone.
Yeah.
And now you have Triple H, who's more hip and more, we see the NXT Black and Gold brand and how good they did it. Now you've got that guy running the show with a blank checkbook. So it's like everyone's on the table to be signed now. Adam Cole could go back there in 5 years. Malachi could go back there in 5 years. MJF could go there. I think MJF going to WWE now is more likely than when Vince was in charge.
Yeah.
So it's like now Tony has to make sure his talent is happy and put them in fulfilling things, or they're going to leave. And we all know that's what happens anyways. People leave, you know, people are going to go where the money's at. But now he really has to fear Triple H's leadership, I think.
Ooh, Petty Betty.
Petty Betty.
Yeah.
So do you think the promotions they announced today were in response to what WWE is doing now?
I think it was in response to Jonathan Gresham. I think that the talent relations aspect of it, I think that goes with, you know, wrestlers saying that there's no communication with the top. And I said it on the Circle Debate, like that's not really a problem for Tony Khan. That should be more of a problem for the talent relations. If wrestlers feel like they can't have no communication with talent relations, then there's a problem with talent relations, because the whole point of that department is to make sure that your wrestlers are being heard and they have that outlet to go talk to. So like, I think that was probably because of the Jonathan Gresham thing, because it wasn't just Gresham. Like we heard from other people. We heard from Chavo Guerrero and Joey Janela and Marco Stunt that there was no communication. Contracts were up and they didn't even know if they were resigning or not, because the company never even reached out to them.
Yeah.
Like, even if you didn't want to resign, you could reach out and say, hey, like, we're going to go a different way. You know, thanks for your time here. None of that. Like, so I think that was in response to that. As for the question, I think that, you know, I was going to bring up the point that the only reason why Tony Khan should fear this new era of the WWE is because of when contracts are up. And we're going to see some contracts up soon. I could see wrestlers wanting to try their hand in WWE because, like you said, it's not ran by Vince McMahon anymore. I would say 99% of wrestlers in general grew up on WWE. So their dream is to go to WWE, have that WrestleMania moment. And now you tell me, like, I could go be valued and I have that as a possibility. Also working for somebody who has his finger on the pulse, like that could make a world of a difference. On the other side of it, though, I think that AEW needs to focus on their own. I think that, you know, if you're truly the alternative, you shouldn't be looking at number one because you're not trying to be number one. You should be your own entity. So I don't even think that they should even be worried about the WWE or anything that they're doing in WWE. You're supposed to be the alternative. You're not supposed to be in a race with WWE. Just go do your own thing.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're right. Like you don't want to, if you start looking, that was WCW's problem.
Yeah.
That's why they fucking folded, was because they stopped worrying about putting out quality content and they were chasing Vince.
So that's Tony Khan's problem too, constantly bringing up, oh, well, we beat them in the 18 to 49 male demographic. Like, you shouldn't even be worried about that. Run your race. Make sure that your your TV partners are happy. Make sure your sponsors are happy. Make sure your talent is happy. And that's it. It shouldn't be what's going on over there.
Keep doing you. They were doing great. Last summer was one of the best 3-4 month stretches of wrestling in a long time in AEW. I feel like since All Out, they've been hit and miss for me. Like they've done some really, really great things and then some lackluster things. I think the thing you were talking about, Mike, where the promotions and bringing in Madison Rayne from Impact TNA to not head up, but be a coach in the women's division, things like that was a response to the lack of communication with like Gresham, Joey Janela, all those guys commenting on it. I think that's spot on. I do think that's not something that AEW was purposefully doing. I think that's just a growing pain of a young business.
Yeah.
Like getting to a point where you're growing quicker than your staff and you're realizing like, fuck, we need more hands on deck because we have more people to handle than what we can handle with the staff we have. I think that's just a growing pain of the business for them.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting though. It's going to be an like this has been the first time in a long time that I've been wanting to see what's going to happen on WWE because I'm just not, admittedly, I'm not a WWE fan. I don't watch the product, but now I'm intrigued as to what's going to happen. So
do you guys think that here's my one thing with Triple H taking over. Do I think it's going to be better? Absolutely. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I think Vince is that classic aging out of touch wrestling promoter. It's a story as old as the business itself. Do I think Triple H will improve? Yes. Do I think he's going to have unlimited creative freedom to do whatever he wants to do? No, because when he was doing NXT, it was kind of like his little sandbox by itself where he's just doing his thing. Not a lot of people were paying attention to it. Now you're handling Raw and SmackDown. The sponsorships, the eyes on your product. I think with the TV 14 rating, if they go through with that, they're going to be able to do a lot more. I think it's going to improve. I think it's going to be great, but I don't think it's going to be this like overnight sensation. He gets to do whatever he wants. He has to serve a lot of masters running 2 monster shows like that with Fox and USA. So I do think it's going to take time. I want to see 6 months from now what's going on. There's a lot of people on the internet right now. It's like Triple H has just changed the game. I'm like, dude, he brought back Dakota Kai. Calm down. Like Bailey was coming back if Vince was there or not. He brought back Dakota Kai. That's not now they're saying wrestling on commentary. Whoop-de-doo. They should have been saying that anyways. You got to do more than that to get me to be like, everything's changed. So I just need time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be telling to see like the long run of the changes instead of like the overnight. Like we saw, like for example, in my opinion, I thought Raw was a very good show, and those 3 hours flew by. Where for as long as I can remember, like those 3 hours dragged. So those 3 hours flew by quickly, and it was a great show. But it's keeping up with 2 shows every week now. Like everybody burns out. So I am interested to see how he's going to delegate different roles to different people and what his regime brings.
He's got 5 hours of TV now.
Yeah.
Instead of just what he had with NXT.
Right. 1 hour of NXT at one point.
Yeah.
When it was network.
When he was at his best, NXT was 1 hour.
1 hour on the network.
It taped 4 episodes in one night, and you were off for the rest of the month.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get out of here, what do you guys think if, the competition is about to ramp up, which is great for us fans.
Yeah.
I feel like both companies are about to start like really dueling as far they're not competition, but they kind of are. You know what I mean? Like the competition makes each company better. So if Triple H does really start step by step, slowly improving this product and getting it back to where it needs to be, what does AEW, what's the one thing from each of you guys, what do you think they need the most to elevate their product?
In my opinion, I think what's going to elevate their product the most is when Tony Khan starts giving more, freedom to, giving more booking roles to other people, letting them run the show. I feel like Tony Khan, he has way too much going on right now to fully book a coherent show. And I think that that's the problem with AEW. There's so much good with AEW, but the screws aren't too tight. So I think that once he puts like a wrestling mind in charge of writing the show and he takes more of like the money man role, I think that's when AEW really is going to get really good. But right now, I just feel like it's a fantasy booking his favorite matches.
I would say if I had to pick one thing right now, I would say time management. I think time management's the biggest thing on Dynamite that we talk about every week, how there's, Rampage commercials and Rampage segments.
Give shit time to breathe, man.
Yeah. And it's, I think time management is something that they need to work on.
That's a great one because it's like every week, oh God, there's 12 minutes left and the main event's just coming on.
Yeah.
But I think they need to start focusing more on having their champions on TV a little more. You have a guy win a title and you don't see them for weeks afterwards. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Let's make those titles meaningful. Like you're bringing in more titles. Let's make the ones we have meaningful and stand out.
That's how you build. That's how dude, look at the Attitude Era when they were making Stone Cold who he was. He was on like 4 fucking segments an episode.
Yeah.
He'd show up at the beginning. He'd show up a couple times in the middle. He'd show up at the end. I mean, and people got to know this is the guy. I think it's a little different for AEW. They're trying to do it a different way. I like what Mike said. I think some of this Tony Khan stuff does come off as a super fan fantasy booking his favorite matchups. I do get that feeling sometimes. If I had to change one thing, and I won't go super deep into it, but it'll shock people what I'm going to say.
Oh boy.
I obviously
there's the shock.
we could say long-term stories, better storytelling. We've said that, but the thing I'm going to say is I want a little more sports entertainment on my AEW. This fucking, like, they keep beating this drum of wrestling. And I love that. I love wrestling. I love that they're owning that.
Yeah.
But when I hear Joey Janela on Renee's Sessions podcast talk about when Cody Rhodes paid to shoot those awesome Miami Vice style vignettes with Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss, and they take it to Tony Khan, and Tony Khan hates it and says, he doesn't like the invisible camera. I'm not a big fan of the invisible camera either, but with vignettes and shit like that, like, you're keeping things like House of Black and factions like that from really getting into some compelling ass shit because you're hardlining this. We're just pro wrestling, dude. You let Jericho do it. Let other guys dabble in sports entertainment a little bit. I think sports entertainment gets kind of a bad rap. I do think it's pro wrestling, but I do like a little bit of that over the top storytelling in my pro wrestling. And I think Tony Khan turns his nose up at that sometimes, and I wish he wouldn't.
It's like back in the 80s and 90s, they always considered wrestling the male soap opera because they gave you those stories that left you wanting more. That's why you're going to turn in next.
Some of the best shit in pro wrestling has been sports entertainment based storylines.
Yeah.
He owns ROH now. If you want to do just something straight up competitive pro wrestling, let that be ROH. Let some of these characters get wild with some shit. I'm specifically thinking of the House of Black because, dude, look at the Ministry. Look what they did with the Ministry in Attitude Era.
No, for sure. One more thing I would do also is make this show a little bit more episodic. Like, they're on every week, but it's not like you must watch every week. There's no cliffhanger endings that make you like, wow, I definitely got to see next week to see how this like plays out.
We're out of time.
Great.
Yeah. And then also on top of that, it's like every match is already announced before the show. It's very, very rare. I think they did it maybe like 1 or 2 times in like the 2-year history or 3-year history of AEW where a match was announced during the show. Or somebody calls somebody out for later tonight, or let's get it on right now. Like, it's usually you get the rundown of what's going to happen on the show, and you don't delegate to anything else that's already on that rundown.
Right.
And so I think that it doesn't make it must watch because say those matches don't intrigue you.
You know what that makes me think, Mike? That makes me think that he doesn't have confidence in a viewer just coming to watch Dynamite. He has to give the matches out there to try and entice people to watch.
Yeah.
The product itself, the brand AEW isn't big enough, at least in Tony's eyes, to bring everyone in. So he has to throw this bait out of Jericho against Claudio. And, he has to throw all this bait to hopefully where a WWE fan will be like, oh God, he's wrestling tonight. Let me watch this. That's what that seems like to me.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because like you look at Raw, like 9 times out of 10, you don't know what the main event of Raw is until Raw starts or like something happens on the show and it's like, oh, that's going to be the main event.
Yeah, because
AEW,
people are tuning in to watch WWE. They're not tuning in to watch these. It's just
Right.
WWE. Your program
Exactly.
Mondays at 8 p.m. Fucking WWE.
That's it.
Exactly.
You guys, I changed my answer. I went to soap opera stories back to make you want to tune in next week. Leave us wanting more.
I'm about it, man.
This was a great debate, guys. Mike,
Yes.
thanks for coming on, man. This was a
It was
lot.
a pleasure.
Robin.
It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
No round robin this week.
Okay. Mike, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Wrestling DeLorean Podcast on every podcast platform, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google. Also, starting August 8th, which I believe this is when this will drop, will be live with the Wrestling DeLorean Podcast on the Circle of Debate YouTube channel. And you can also catch me on Circle of Debate every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So there's a lot of places you can watch me. People get sick of me because I'm on like every single day, sometimes like twice a day.
Awesome. Dude, we got to have you back on, man. This was a
I'd
lot
love to
of
be
fun.
back on for sure.
We'll put you in the rotation for sure.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Definitely. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Turnbuckle Debate. Make sure you guys are following theturnbuckletavern.com for all of your tavern needs. It's that time. Tom, it's your time. Get your shit in, pal.
Big night every Tuesday, 7 p.m. YouTube, Twitch, and Fridays, Turnbuckle Sessions, me and Mike Belcaster.
I know it's a thing every week. Why do we give him that time?
I don't know. We just have to. He's
I
stable.
guess
My contract.
Court is